Imagine millions of people stranded in the cold without electricity, heat, or running water. Infrastructure has been crippled. Families are huddling for warmth in parked cars and boiling water in their homes to ensure it's safe to drink. This may sound like the plot out of a post-apocalyptic film, but it was very much a reality for millions of people across Texas in the week of February 13th through the 17th, 2021, that engulfed the entire state of Texas in plunging temperatures. To better understand how this happened, and more importantly, why wasn't the state of Texas better prepared, let's see what went wrong right from the beginning.
First, Texas. To unpack what happened here, let's take things step by step. First, freezing Arctic air, usually pinned way farther north by a ring of rapid wind called the jet stream, made its way southward, plunging much of North America into a deep freeze that engulfed Texas.
It was colder than normal for longer than normal, and it affected every single county in the state.
There are some winters where we never hit freezing. In this case, the challenge we had was the consistency, day after day after day, no warming up, no getting to above freezing.
Texas is powered roughly half by natural gas, 20% by coal, another 20% by wind and solar, and 10% by nuclear. With summer temperatures regularly hitting 90 plus, even 100 plus degrees Fahrenheit, Texans plan for heat. The state doesn't design its power plants and natural gas system to work in super cold conditions.
We are constantly designing our plants to take heat off. Ventilation, exhaust systems, there's a lot of cooling that happens with recycled water, and you're trying to keep that plant as cool as possible. And in the north, you'll find power plants fully encased with a permanent structure, brick, steel, all the things that they need. They will also create permanent coverings for those exposed lines, and we just don't have that structure.
Most power plants use heat to drive turbines to create electricity. Texas temporarily winterizes those plants each year through insulation, portable heaters, scaffolding. But when the bitterly cold weather descended in mid-February,
a lot of the infrastructure for delivering electricity just froze.
Not just for delivering electricity, but also the equipment for making electricity froze.
We had freeze-offs in the natural gas system that actually froze at the wellhead and clogged the wellhead, or froze in the equipment or in the gathering lines, the pipelines. We couldn't get the gas to the power plants. And we have 4 nuclear reactors in Texas. One of them turned off because of a frozen water pump.
A pump that'd usually help circulate water that gets heated to form steam and drive the turbines.
We have several coal plants that turned off because of frozen equipment at the coal plants, along with some snow on solar panels, and then some of the wind turbines had ice. So we had outages throughout the system.
These outages turned off electricity in different parts of the state, including sections of the natural gas system that are electrically operated, pumps, antifreeze injection systems, etc. And that led to the shutdown of even more power plants. It became a set of cascading failures.
So we have a water problem, freezing water, become a gas problem, become a power problem, become a bigger gas problem, become a bigger power problem, become a water problem and a humanitarian crisis.
At the same time, across the state, demand was surging as frigid Texans were trying to heat their homes. 6 out of every 10 homes in the state use electricity for heating. The lack of supply, combined with the spike in demand, meant trouble for the grid, the network used to deliver electricity to consumers. To avoid massive equipment failures, parts of the system are programmed to trip off if they get overloaded, which can happen when a lot of people suddenly demand more electricity than normal all at once.
We had to bring things back into balance, or the whole grid would have gone down. And once the whole grid goes down, it takes weeks or months to bring it back up, and we were within seconds to minutes of a complete collapse.
That's because when demand far outstrips supply, basically when things fall too far out of balance, it can trip all the power plants, causing a system-wide blackout. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, which administers Texas's grid and serves about 85% of the state, leapt into action.
ERCOT is like a air traffic controller. They can see everything. We rely on ERCOT to tell us when they think it's going to get really bad.
And this situation was really bad. Power had to be turned off immediately, not with rolling blackouts, but with controlled blackouts that descended on certain parts of the state and lasted for a couple, and in some cases, several days.
So some circuits are on and some are off, where we turned them off and kept them off.
Low-income communities tend to be more vulnerable in a crisis like this due to poor infrastructure and fewer resources to facilitate recovery. One of the challenges was that when it comes to its grid, Texas is a land unto itself.
In the United States, there are 3 grids, East, West, and Texas. Texas happens to have an independent grid for a variety of reasons.
Like being untethered by federal regulations, and the fact that, unlike most other states, Texas can generate enough power within its borders to be self-sufficient.
We generate power, we transmit it, we distribute it, and we serve customers.
But it means if things go wrong, we have trouble importing power from neighboring states. So we can't lean on our neighbor the way most states can. We're really on our own when it comes to dealing with tough weather. And so it's all great until it doesn't work, and then things can fall apart quickly.
So what happened in Texas is really, it's not just about Texas, it's about aging infrastructure, it's about the need to rethink our energy infrastructure, the need to build in resilience in response to a changing climate in many, many different parts of the world. The risks 20, 30, 40 years ago are different from the risks that we face now.
Right now, we're building our infrastructure for yesterday's weather, not tomorrow's weather. The next 100 years will be different. We know this, that the weather events will be more extreme and more frequent, which means hotter and colder, wetter and drier. So we have to deal with this and design for that.
We need reliability and we need affordability. While we work on making the environment better, we need to do outage management by a whole different way so people aren't out all day while we still try to prevent a blackout.
Now, what happened in Texas, while rare, was not unanticipated. A decade ago, in February 2011, a winter storm blew through Texas, leading to rolling blackouts across the state.
And that led to a major report with their official assessment and their recommendations. Recommendations such as winterizing our plants so they work better when it's cold, just like they do in northern climates like in Minnesota or the Northeast.
Winterization could cost perhaps tens of billions of dollars.
Implementing the solutions should take years to do. A decade was enough, and it looks like we didn't do it very much, or certainly not enough. Now we go to 2021. This will match Hurricane Harvey or even be more in terms of damage.
The damage caused by the February freeze is expected to cost Texas about $130 billion, well above the estimated cost of winterizing.
We can do other things like consider connecting to other grids so we can get reliability benefits from other states. We could diversify the fuel supply so we're not so reliant on fossil fuels. We could integrate other technologies that let us have either more resilience to bring the grid back faster or to prevent the collapse in the first place. And then make sure solutions are implemented in an equitable way.
There have been calls for upgrading grid-level infrastructure over the course of the past decade in a place like Texas. The question really is, why weren't we prepared to handle such a catastrophe?
We're an example of what can happen if you ignore reality. If the most energy-abundant region in the world can run short on energy, it can happen anywhere. So climate science can be integrated into our energy planning to make the energy systems perform better. That's what we need to do.
In this insider-exclusive network TV special, The Deadly 2021 Texas Power Grid Failure, our news team is on location with Brent Coon, founder and CEO of the Brent Coon Associates law firm, with his co-counsel Robert Schwartz, who on April 26, 2020 filed their first lawsuit for 95 clients against over 300 defendants, and on February 10th, 2023 filed an additional 4,122 plaintiff cases, all cases of which have now been consolidated into one Texas state multi-district litigation court for all pretrial matters. The BCA lawsuit seeks to hold these defendants, power companies, distribution companies, electric grid operators, and others of failing to prepare properly for the power grid failure, creating a catastrophe that caused property damage, countless injuries, and hundreds of deaths. One expert, estimates the cost of the freeze was as high as $300 billion. Brent and Bob explained the many challenges this case presents, as well as the responsibilities and legal duties that the state of Texas and the defendants owe the citizens of Texas. The companies that generate and deliver power to Texas households and businesses cannot be permitted to put Texans in a position where they're deprived of electrical services, potable water, and heat for an extended period of time during freezing temperatures. Brent and Bob have earned reputations as unyielding trial lawyers who repeatedly represent individuals and families against big companies and the Goliaths of the world, and repeatedly win. They are dedicated to uncovering the hidden catastrophic factors that put our fellow citizens at risk and wreak havoc on an important sector of our economy. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Beaumont, Texas. It is my great pleasure to introduce Brent Coon and Robert Schwartz to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What do you guys practice primarily?
You know, most of what we do, all of what we do is plaintiff-oriented. Some of it is personal injury. Some of it is commercial. We represent businesses that have been harmed as a result of the conduct of other companies as well, breach of contract, things like that. But it's all plaintiff-oriented litigation.
Let's talk about February 13th, 2021. What happened on that date here?
Got cold, real cold.
So cold that?
So cold that we lost all power throughout the state. Our energy grid collapsed.
And this lawsuit, it's a massive lawsuit, right? This lawsuit is against all the organizations and the people involved in those organizations who should have been prepared, right? Because what happened as a result of not being prepared in the state of Texas?
Texas is so vain. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But Texas and Texans are so vain that we decided that we needed our own power grid instead of participating in a national grid. So the problem that we had as a result of that is that when local, Texas suppliers and distributors of the energy sources we needed to run to produce electricity, when they all started getting shut down as a result of the freeze and their systems collapsing, we didn't have enough going through the system to keep it sustainable. And so we went from intermittent brownouts to complete blackout across the whole city.
Yeah, and you're bringing up, Texas wants to be independent, vain, that sort of thing. Normally, the way electrical grids work is they'll borrow electricity from another grid in another state. But you guys didn't have that, did you? State of Texas didn't have that.
No, we're too good to share.
Too good to share. And as a result of being too good to share, people died, didn't they?
Yeah, lots of people died.
And you're representing some of those people and many more, right? And who are you actually suing?
Every company that was obligated to produce power to the grid, who failed to produce power to the grid, is a defendant in this litigation. So that's lots of different distributors throughout the system. All of their stuff is a fungible product that goes into the system to keep it sustainable. So when each one of them, if one of them failed, we would be okay. If 10 of them failed, we'd be okay. But when almost all of them failed, we weren't okay.
Now, the reason that these lawsuits exist is the government has a responsibility to protect citizens, correct?
Well, indirectly, the government has some degree of responsibility here because we set up a quasi-public entity called ERCOT that oversees all this. The question of their independent liability is still an uncertain and disputed fact because of their quasi-governmental immunity. So that's to be determined. But they're still in charge of overseeing the grid system. And the grid itself, the people that provide, the companies that provide the power system, they all knew better than to rely on warm weather to be able to operate, because we'd had freezes before, not as bad as this one, and not as long and sustained as this one. We were in the teens here for several days. Up north, all these other states, they have cold weather like this all the time. They protect for that by winterizing or weatherizing their equipment. insulating it in a manner to where if it gets really cold for any period of time, they're still fine and their processors will still function. Down here, because it's normally not that cold, we didn't do any of that. So none of these people, none of these companies did that, even though they knew that the industry as a whole did it. All the states up north did it. They had the same problems even in Texas before, just not as bad, and were told to do it. There were several reports that came out from 2 or 3 prior phases a decade ago and another one 20 years ago, where that entire industry of grid supporters in Texas were all told, you need to weatherize and winterize all of your systems so that you don't have a failure again. And almost none of them did. And it wouldn't have cost that much to do it, but they just said, we don't have to do it. We're not required by law to do it. We'll take our chances.
Yeah. Well, you're bringing up a very good point, because when we pay utility companies, we're paying not only for the service that we are provided, but we're also paying for them to update, winterize, right, their plants and their facilities. So then when we need them, right, they're there. And that's the responsibility. Talk about some of these cases against some of these defendants have been dismissed. And they've been dismissed as a result of immunity, sovereign immunity. Talk about that issue.
Right. Well, that's where we get into ERCOT again. We believe that the government has some level of accountability because the government set up and created agencies that would monitor and oversee these issues, and obviously they failed. So we believe there's some degree of culpability there. The question is, even though there's a culpability, is there a legal liability? Because we mentioned the state and state actors, governance. Governance is most of the time protected from civil liability because they're operating at the behest of the public. So they get what is called governmental immunity. And it's kind of a whitewashed way of saying, we don't have liability, we don't need insurance because you cannot sue us because we're not a suable entity. The issue of whether or not the agencies in charge here do have a legal duty that is not immunized is going to be an issue that ultimately our Supreme Court will have to decide.
Yeah. Now, Judge Matthews is overseeing this case, correct?
Yes.
Okay. She has dismissed the case against ERCOT.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask Bob you of this. Also, she's dismissed the cases against retail electric providers, correct?
Right.
And natural gas suppliers.
That's right.
But more importantly, she has not allowed any written discovery to be exchanged to date, correct?
You know, this litigation is almost 2 years old. The storm happened over 2 years ago, not much over 2 years ago, and we're still in very preliminary stages. You know, there were 5 bellwether cases that were selected for her to allow dispositive motions to be filed against. And that's where these dismissals came from. And we had one of the bellwether cases. And we had dismissals, but there were partial dismissals and partial denials of the defendants' motions. So the defendants filed appeals and we filed appeals. It's not just the appeal against the ERCOT dismissal that we filed.
Right. You know, the reason I'm bringing this up is because you can have all the facts on your side. You can have all the law on your side. But if you're dealing with a judge who doesn't want to move forward on something, it's a big hurdle.
Right. Well, this has been, it's intimidating litigation. You literally have multitudes of lawyers on both sides, hundreds of lawyers on both sides. The sheer weight of the litigation with this many defendants and this many plaintiffs is sometimes overwhelming for one judge to have to make decisions on. And you get into some degree of prioritization problems and paralysis by analysis. And that's why we're 2 years into this litigation and we're still very early on in some of these decisions. But she has to digest scores of motions filed by both sides. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of good law out there for her to follow in a lot of these issues because this is somewhat precedential litigation. We don't have suits like this every day. This is the first time you've had a massive suit against our grid because it's the first time we've had such a widespread failure. But even though it was the first time we had a widespread failure, it's like, was it predictable? Was it knowable? Yes, it was. The industry had even been told before from lesser events in the past, you must go out and do these things or you're going to have this problem again and it could be worse. And when you lose your power and people are at home relying on it, and they can't get any power for days, and they're locked into their homes. They can't get to a hospital or anywhere else, and they're stuck there, and they're on oxygen at home, and they're having to rely on electricity. Maybe you have power that's out for a day, but you can't go out for a week. and people didn't have any heat. People died of hypothermia. They froze to death. People died because they didn't have equipment at home, necessary medical equipment to keep them sustained, and they couldn't get to a hospital in the middle of that freeze. So Texas was just very poorly prepared. Our pants were down around our ankles, so to speak, in the preparation of this, because it is a warm state, but it's still something that the industry knew about. The industry takes care of everywhere else, and we left ourselves in this vain position of leaving ourselves that vulnerable. I say we, the state. And understandably, the consumer and the people we represent have an understandable right to be outraged about what happened here, because it was just blatant disregard of the protection of these people that were going to need it.
Right. We have kind of a precedent in the state where I'm from, California, when we look at some of the utility companies that didn't update their power stations and caused a lot of fires.
That's right. They charge you for that.
Yeah, they charge you for it.
But they don't spend the money on it.
That's right.
Where does that money go then?
Where does that money go?
Yeah, I think we know where that money goes. It's not to me and you. It's not to the consumer.
We have a number of people that we're going to do Zoom interviews. Tell us a little bit about them and what happened to them. First, let me bring up Randy Turner.
Randy Turner is the brother of Terrell Turner. And Terrell actually is one who died because of the storm. Terrell was in very poor health when the storm came through, and suffered death right after or during the storm.
He died of hypothermia, right?
He did.
Yeah. You have another client. He lives in Dallas, right? And he had a business that was affected. Not only people died, but business were affected.
Well, let me tell you, my situation and Brent's situation, temperature in the teens for 4 days and temperature in my house at 40 degrees. Everything froze everywhere. There was ice everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere. And these people, like this gentleman in Dallas, it's going to be colder in Dallas. He couldn't get to work. He couldn't operate his business. A lot of people lost income. We had a lot of business damages. We had property damages. We had personal injuries. And then, of course, like Mr. Turner, we had deaths.
Yeah, what happened with a lot of these, Steve, is that if you're in a house that has pipes running off through your water pipes and stuff, if your house stays warm enough, the pipes inside your house don't freeze. And down in Texas, because we don't have massive freezes all the time, typically the pipes are not as heavily insulated, even in a residential business, as it would be more up north, because we don't get that much cold weather. But when you lose power for days, the inside temperature of your house gets pretty close to the outside temperature. So when that outside temperature stays well below freezing, you don't have a source of heat in your house, the inside of your house gets well below freezing. And then, of course, all your pipes freeze, because they weren't built to protect from that. And the extended loss of power and the extended loss of heat capabilities was what got those houses in the interior walls to a point to where they all froze. So then when the power finally did come back up, all these pipes then fall back out, and now all the pipes have busted because the water froze up in them. So you have water running through all your walls into your house that went to your sinks, your bathrooms, your toilets, your bathtubs, showers. All these places where water ran are now all busted pipes, just completely ruining your house. Then you get black mold in them, and then you have to tear everything out back down to the studs, and it's a big mess. And that happened to hundreds of thousands of homes. In fact, the insurance industry that was able to pay for people that had insurance on there spent many billions of dollars on those repairs, and they are plaintiffs in this lawsuit seeking the same recoveries for the reimbursement of what they spent.
Are you representing them, or they represent?
They have their own counsel, yeah, but the plaintiffs here are a multitude of not only the families of dead people, not only the people that suffered in their business and their residential property damages and other injuries, but even these insurance companies that spent a lot of money that frankly they should not have had to have spent to make repairs for people that had insurance, and they want their money back too.
So it would seem to me that with a lot of these insurance companies, they want to recover that money as quickly as possible. Where are they in terms of getting their cases heard?
They're in the same boat as us. Everybody's frustrated with the process, but it's a big unwieldy process. It'll get sorted out. This is going to take some time. We would like it to be quicker, but the wheels of justice turn slowly sometimes, as they say.
And we have some Zoom interviews, and we're going to go to them right now, and each person will tell their story. So let's do that right now.
My name is Randy Turner. I am a sibling of Terrell Turner. There were several siblings in our family. Terrell was next to the youngest. He was 50 years old at the time of his death. We were about a little over a year apart. I'm currently now 54. And me and Terrell, we were probably the closest of all the siblings because of our age group. We did everything together. We played together. We fought together. We looked out for each other. We held secrets together. Even today, that even though our parents have both deceased, that we have secrets that no one in the family know but us because of our age group. When he died, it just opened up a whole realm of emotions that I thought I had experienced in my life. But when he died, it let me know that there's actually levels to grief, and he opened up those levels and brought me into a world where I'm still dealing with it. I'm still dealing with the loss of his life because he's no more. And for me, I'm just trying to get closure. I just kind of want to make sure that, and it's not even a make sure, I just hope that no one else have to experience what I've been through on something that actually is capable of preventing. I know there are sometimes situations where you can't prevent certain things. But in my heart of hearts, I know this could have been prevented. But I guess at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that no family have to go through what my family have been through in a situation that we know till date was 100% preventable of happening. And that's my goal in all this, wherever it might lead. My connection with Brent Coon at the beginning was it was just sheer searching the web, and I came across him, and I did my due diligence, and I reached out to him, and until they have been so inclusive. They have done everything that I asked. They've not been invasive. I have not had to do anything that was demanding. They keep up to date with the case, and I cannot, for lack of a better of words, I trust them. If I had to do it over again, I would do it again tomorrow. I trust them. I put my faith in them, and they have done everything up to date that I can only ask and beyond.
Hi, my name's Chelsea. I'm from Texas, born and raised, and I run heavy equipment for a living. When the storm, at the time, my dad was still alive, and he had a very complicated health history. He had a trach tube, feeding tube, and an oxygen bag. So living like in the rural area is already difficult for us, supply-wise, and like just anything we need, we have to be creative. So when the storm happened, we didn't have access to the few stores and things that we normally do. So my dad's medication, all his supplies, I mean, we were having to figure out what we were going to do. I remember getting the snow and like bringing in buckets, and me and my dad would like filter the water. I had just got a truck at the time, big F-350, and I went to go like help pull people out of the snow and things like that. But it was difficult on my dad's part because I didn't know when I was going to be able to get, clean water or more supplies for him. And I mean, his health depended on that. After things kind of settled, I went online and I was Googling for assistance, disaster relief, anything along those lines. And I found Brent Coon law firm, and they're very helpful. They've kept us up to date as far as, they needed us to submit other paperwork and just go over, things, our damages and things like that. So it's my understanding that they're having a difficult time getting somewhere. There's so many people that were affected.
So one final question. It's a huge case, over 4,000 plaintiffs, right? How does a case like this get adjudicated? Tell us the process.
Well, first let me say we represent over 4,000 people. There are over 20,000 cases that have been filed.
Yeah, probably 40.
It's an enormous piece of litigation.
And this, for the state of Texas, would be a precedent-setting case, wouldn't it?
This is precedent-setting.
When you have cases like that, you knew going into this case that you'd be up against a monstrous amount of work. This costs a lot of money.
Will cost millions of dollars to prosecute.
Yeah, this is a case where your law firm really shows what you intend to do with all of your cases.
Well, and we're taking a lot of risk here. When our firm commits millions of dollars of legal resources because we don't get paid unless we get a recovery, we don't charge by the hour like a lot of firms. It's all contingency, plaintiff representation, and we spend the money. All the experts, all the depositions, will be hundreds of depositions. The time involved, we'll have to carry all these costs at our firm for many years. And the outcome is still uncertain. Now, we believe from a legal analysis, even though this is precedent setting, that we should prevail against a number of the parties. Now, it remains to be seen if the court system is going to agree with our legal position on these issues or whether or not our courts are going to ultimately give all of them some protection. And if they do, we just made a bad business decision and thought with our heart instead of our mind, trying to help these folks out. So that's a risk we all take, and it's not a risk that we're borne slowly by our firm. We have consolidated the work through the multi-district litigation process where several other firms have been willing to take this risk with us and their clients. And again, we have even the insurance industry, and many different insurance companies have coalesced as well. So we think we have a pretty good army.
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen the insurance industry align with a plaintiff firm.
It is rare. It is very rare that we both want the same outcome.
I want to thank you both for being on the show, and good luck with this. Keep us updated.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.